My mother's cruel laughter echoed through the stadium as I stumbled, but the $5 million secret burning a hole in my pocket was about to silence them. Forever. If you grew up anywhere near Pueblo, Colorado, you know that in families like the Culders, success isn't celebrated. It is treated like a suspicious medical condition. It is something everyone pretends to care about while secretly hoping it gets worse so they have something to gossip about at the country club. My name is Jory Calder, and for 22 years, I was the punchline to a joke I didn't realize was being told at my expense. To my adoptive parents, I was always the difficult one, the unpredictable daughter, the charity case who wasted money chasing pointless degrees. Meanwhile, my brother, Rhett, could set a literal barn on fire, which he actually did when he was 16, and they would blame the match for being too emotional. The dynamic was set in stone the day they brought me home. Rhett was their golden bloodline, the biological prince with the bright blue eyes and the terrifying lack of accountability. I was the black daughter they adopted to polish their public image, a prop to be wheeled out when they needed to look benevolent, then shelved when I had opinions or ambitions. By the time I reached my senior year at Arizona State University, the divide wasn't just emotional. It was financial. I was working 3 part-time jobs, barista, library clerk, and freelance tutor, just to keep the lights on. I slept in a shared apartment in Tempe with a mold problem so aggressive we named the spores, while Rhett, who had dropped out of community college 3 years prior, was driving a lifted truck my father paid for. During finals week, while I was surviving on instant ramen and panic, I received a text from my mother. Didn't ask how my exams were going. Didn't ask if I was okay. It read, "If you can't afford to come home for Thanksgiving, maybe you should rethink your life choices. Rhett is looking at jet skis. Maybe ask him for a loan." The kicker. They hadn't contributed a single dollar to my education. Not one. But when graduation rolled around, they demanded front row seats. In their words, family should always look supportive. They didn't plan on actually being supportive, of course. They just wanted the photo op. They wanted to play the role of the proud parents of the rescued child, soaking up praise for a finish line they didn't help me cross. The morning of commencement, the Arizona sun was already baking the asphalt by 9 a.m. I spotted them immediately. It was hard to miss them. My parents, Rhett, and his fiancée, Maribel, were dressed like they were attending the Oscars rather than a university graduation. My mother was wearing a hat that looked like a satellite dish, and Rhett was wearing a suit that cost more than my entire tuition. As I walked past the section cordoned off for families, trying to find my place in the procession line, I heard my dad's booming voice. He was loudly joking to a neighbor that I probably bribed a TA to pass my capstone project. Rhett laughed so hard he spilled his iced latte. "Classic Jory," he snorted, wiping foam off his lapel. "Always hustling, never actually smart." People stared. I kept my head down, adjusting the gold sash around my neck, the sash that signified summa cum laude, a detail they hadn't bothered to notice. I pretended not to know them. That was the first laugh of the day. The second came an hour later. The ceremony was dragging on, the heat rising in waves off the stadium turf. When my row finally stood up to approach the stage, my nerves were frayed wires. I was walking toward the ramp, focused on not tripping, which naturally meant that I tripped. It was just a tiny stumble, the toe of my heel catching the hem of my gown, but in the momentary lull of the crowd, it was audible. From the VIP section, a shriek of laughter pierced the air. It was Maribel. She was pointing, hysterical, loud enough that half my row turned around. My mother leaned into her, not to hush her, but to whisper, loud enough for the people around them to hear. "Grace isn't exactly her strong suit, is it?" My face burned. The humiliation was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest. But I kept walking. I straightened my spine, fixed my cap, because I knew something they didn't. A week earlier I had received 2 emails. One was from my department head, confirming my honor status. The other was from a law firm in Seattle, with a subject line that looked like phishing. Confidential notice regarding beneficiary status. Curiosity had won out. Opened it. A man named Keegan Rowland, A retired tech investor my late grandmother, Eleanor, used to work for in the 90s, had passed away. I vaguely remembered Grandma Eleanor talking about Mr. Keegan, a man she had nursed through a difficult chemotherapy treatment years before I was born. Apparently, he had never forgotten her kindness. He had left behind an educational trust fund earmarked for the descendants of Eleanor Calder. There were 2 descendants, me and Rhett. But the PDF attached to the email contained a stipulation that made my heart stop. It read, "Beneficiary must meet the academic requirements stipulated in the 2004 codicil. Graduate with a bachelor's degree from an accredited university by age 23. I read it 20 times. The requirement was simple, yet specific. Rhett had dropped out of community college at 20. He was now 25. He had no degree. I, on the other hand, was graduating exactly 1 month before my 23rd birthday. I hadn't told anyone. Not a soul. I wanted to be sure. I had spent the last week exchanging documents with the lawyers, verifying my identity, verifying my graduation status. The ink was dry. The funds were ready for disbursement upon the official conferral of my degree. So, as I regained my balance and ascended the stairs to the stage, the sound of my family's laughter was still ringing in my ears. I handed my name card to the announcer. He looked at it, then paused. He looked at a man standing next to him, a stage manager holding a clipboard and wearing a headset. The manager nodded vigorously. The announcer didn't read my name immediately. Instead, he leaned into the microphone. The murmuring in the arena rose like a storm as the procession halted. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host's voice boomed, echoing off the rafters. "We have a special announcement regarding one of our graduates. Ms. Jory Calder, please remain here at the podium." Froze. In the stands, I saw my parents stiffen. Rhett stopped scrolling on his phone. The host continued, his voice taking on a formal, grave tone. "A private foundation has notified the university administration that Ms. Calder has officially satisfied the conditions for the full disbursement of the Roland Academic Trust." He paused for effect. The stadium went dead silent. "This endowment, granted for academic excellence and perseverance, totals $5 million. Silence. Absolute vacuum-sealed silence. Then a gasp rippled through the crowd. And then a scream, my mother's. She shoved her way into the aisle, her designer hat knocking into a stranger. "What?" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "That's a mistake. It's for Rhett." My dad was standing now, face purple, yelling at a security guard that someone needed to redo the math. Maribel started crying, loudly sobbing that she had already picked a house. I stood center stage, the diploma in my hand, looking down at the chaos. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one crying. I looked at my mother, whose face was twisted in a mixture of greed and horror, and I smiled. A genuine, radiant smile. But as the security guards began to move toward my family to escort them out, the stage manager walked up to me. He wasn't smiling. He handed me a heavy, cream-colored envelope sealed with red wax. "Ms. Calder," he whispered, away from the microphone. "The attorneys asked me to give you this immediately after the announcement. They said the money is just the beginning. You need to open this now." I looked at the seal. It was stamped with an emblem I didn't recognize. My heart hammered against my ribs. Below me, my family was being physically restrained, but up here, the air felt thin, charged with something dangerous. I slid my finger under the flap of the envelope. The paper sliced my skin, a tiny paper cut, stinging and sharp. "What is it?" I whispered. "The rest of the inheritance," the manager said, his eyes darting to my parents below. "And the proof of what they did to you. Have you ever been the one everyone bet against? The one they laughed at while you were secretly holding all the aces? If you've ever felt like the black sheep who was actually the GOAT, I need you to smash that like button right now. Do it for Jory. Subscribe and turn on notifications because we are just getting started. And trust me, you do not want to miss the karma that is coming for this family. What city are you watching from? And what is the one dream you're refusing to give up on, no matter what your haters say? Let's talk in the comments. The applause was deafening, a physical wall of sound that vibrated against my chest, but it felt distant, like static on a bad radio connection. My world had narrowed down to the heavy, cream-colored envelope in my hand. The red wax seal, stamped with a K, felt cool against my sweating palm. "Miss Calder," the stage manager said, his hand gently touching my elbow. "We need to move. The situation at the exit is volatile." I nodded, feeling like I was walking underwater. I clutched my diploma in one hand and the envelope in the other, allowing him to guide me off the stage. The sun was blinding, but as we stepped into the shade of the stadium tunnel, the temperature dropped, and the reality of the last 5 minutes began to set in. $5 million. I was free. I was rich. I was Jory. The shriek echoed off the concrete walls of the tunnel. Stop. 20 feet away, near the security checkpoint, my family was a writhing knot of expensive fabric and rage. 2 campus police officers were blocking their path. My mother was breathless, her face a mask of ruined mascara and fury. Rhett was pacing like a caged tiger, kicking at a trash can, while Maribel was on her phone, presumably calling a lawyer or a realtor. "Let me through," my father bellowed, his face a dangerous shade of purple. "That is my daughter. We need to protect her interests." The stage manager tried to steer me toward a side door, but I planted my feet. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the urge to shrink. I walked toward them. "Jory!" My mother lunged forward, stopped only by the officer's outstretched arm. Her expression shifted instantly from rage to a grotesque parody of maternal concern. "Oh, thank God. Jory, honey, listen to me. That man on stage, he's a fraud. We need to get that check and put it in the family account immediately. For safekeeping. You know you're not good with numbers." I stopped just out of reach. "I graduated summa cum laude, mother. I think I can handle the math. It's $5 million. Rhett shouted, stopping his pacing. He looked at me with eyes that were terrifyingly empty. "That's my money, Jory. Grandma Eleanor was my grandmother too. You're just the add-on." "The requirement was a degree, Rhett," I said, my voice steady, though my knees were shaking. "You dropped out to become a DJ. Remember." "We can fix that," my dad interjected, desperate. "We can sue the university. We can say the terms were discriminatory. Jory, get in the car. We're going to the bank." I looked at them, really looked at them. I saw the greed, the panic, the absolute lack of love. They didn't see a daughter. They saw a winning lottery ticket they had thrown in the trash and were now trying to uncrumple. "No," I said. My mother froze. "Excuse me. No. I'm not getting in the car. I'm not going to the bank with you. And I'm certainly not sharing a cent of this with the people who let me sleep in a moldy apartment while buying jet skis." I turned my back on them. "If you walk away," my father roared, his voice echoing in the tunnel, "don't you dare come back. You're dead to us." "I was dead to you the moment I couldn't be used," I called back over my shoulder. I followed the manager into a secure green room, reserved for VIP guests. He closed the door, locking out the screaming. The silence was heavy. I sat on a folding chair, my hands trembling as I lifted the envelope. "What you choose to do next will affect your entire family." I broke the wax seal. The paper inside was old, the handwriting sharp and angular. I began to read. "My dear Jory, if you are reading this, you have succeeded where they expected you to fail. Congratulations. The $5 million is yours, free and clear. But the money is the least of what I have left you. You see, I didn't just track your academic progress. I tracked the finances of the Calder household. I know about the monthly stipend the state sent for your care when you were first adopted. I know about the college fund your biological mother left for you before she died, the one your adoptive parents swore never existed." My breath hitched. My biological mother. They didn't just neglect you, Jory. They stole from you. And in this envelope is the bank ledger proving it. But that is not the twist. The twist is what they used that stolen money to buy. I turned the page and the room spun. The item listed on the ledger wasn't a car or a vacation. It was a deed. The deed to the very ground my parents' house stood on. The ink on the page seemed to vibrate. Date of purchase: August 14, 2001. Source of funds: the Jory Trust. My hands shook, but not from fear anymore. It was a cold, crystalline rage. For 2 decades, I had listened to my father lament the cost of feeding me. I had watched my mother sigh every time she had to sign a permission slip for a field trip, acting as if my very existence was a drain on their hard-earned resources. They had called me a charity case. They had called me a burden. But they hadn't earned their lifestyle. I had. Or rather, the mother I never knew had provided it for me. Ms. Calder. I looked up. The stage manager had stepped aside, allowing a woman in a slate-gray power suit to enter the room. She carried a briefcase that looked like it cost more than my car. "I'm Alana Vance," she said, extending a hand. "I represent the Keegan Rowland estate. I take it you've read the addendum." I held up the ledger, my knuckles white. "Is this real? Did they actually steal my inheritance to buy their house?" Alana sat down opposite me, her expression grim but professional. "It's worse than that, Jory. Your biological mother left you a significant life insurance policy. The Calders were the trustees. They were supposed to invest it for your future. Instead, they liquidated the account 3 months after your adoption was finalized to purchase the property at 4200 Oak Ridge Drive. The Calder estate," I whispered. "The house with the pool I wasn't allowed to use when their friends came over. The house where I slept in the smallest room, originally a pantry, while Rhett had the renovated master suite in the basement." "Correct," Alana said. She clicked open her briefcase. "However, Mr. Rowland was thorough. When he discovered the embezzlement years ago, he didn't sue them. He knew that would just drain the money on legal fees. Instead, he bought the mortgage note from the bank when your father fell behind on payments in 2008. She slid a thick document across the table. "Keegan Rowland held the mortgage in the trust. He became their lender. They've been paying interest to a shell corporation for 15 years, never realizing the money was cycling back into your trust fund." My mouth went dry. "So, who owns the debt now?" Alana smiled, a sharp, shark-like expression that told me she enjoyed her job very much. "You do, Jory. As of this morning, you are the sole holder of the mortgage note. And, according to my records, your parents have missed the last 3 payments to fund Rhett's engagement party." I looked at the document. It was a foreclosure notice, pre-filled, just waiting for a signature. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from Rhett. "Mom is hyperventilating in the car. You better fix this, you selfish brat. We're going to the house. Don't bother coming back unless you have a check." They were going to the house. My house. I looked at Alana. "They're heading there now. We can have the sheriff meet them," Alana suggested, reaching for her phone. "No," I said, standing up. The trembling had stopped completely. I felt a strange sense of calm, the kind that comes right before a storm breaks. I picked up my diploma. I picked up the check for $5 million. And I picked up the foreclosure notice. "I don't want the sheriff," I said, smoothing down my graduation gown. "They wanted a family gathering. They wanted to talk about finances. I think I'm finally ready to have that conversation." I looked at the door. "I'm going home." Alana closed her briefcase with a satisfying snap. "I'll drive." Alana's luxury sedan glided through the wrought iron gates of the Oak Ridge community. My stomach didn't churn like it usually did when I visited this zip code. Usually, I felt like a trespasser, a stain on the pristine fabric of this neighborhood. Today, as we idled past the manicured lawns and the fountains that wasted water in the desert heat, I felt something new. I felt like the landlord. "Remember," Alana said, putting the car in park at the bottom of the driveway. The engine purred into silence. "You hold the leverage. But people like this, when they're cornered, they don't surrender. They attack." I looked up at the house. It was a sprawling colonial-style mansion that screamed old money, even though the money was stolen and the old part was just a facade of stucco and columns. "Let them try," I said. I got out of the car. I didn't knock. I still had my key on my keychain, a rusty little piece of metal I had kept on my lanyard for 4 years, foolishly hoping I'd be invited back for a holiday or a birthday. I unlocked the heavy oak door and pushed it open. Voices drifted from the formal living room. "She has to sign it over," my father was saying, his voice booming with that fake authoritative tone he used on waiters. "It's a family trust. We are the family. The law is on our side. I need that money for the venue deposit by Friday," Maribel whined. "My dad said he's not paying for the catering if we don't lock down the hall." "She'll buckle," Rhett said, his voice slurred. "She always does. Jory is weak. She's probably crying in a dorm room right now, waiting for us to call." I walked into the room. The air conditioning was blasting, but the tension was hotter than the asphalt outside. They were gathered around the glass coffee table, a bottle of expensive scotch open. Rhett saw me first. He smirked, leaning back on the white leather sofa, swirling his drink. "Look who decided to show up. Finally came to your senses." My mother stood up, smoothing her dress. She quickly adjusted her face from panicked to disappointed matriarch. "Jory, we were just discussing your outburst. We're willing to forgive the scene you caused at the stadium, provided you rectify the financial situation immediately." "Rectify," I repeated, standing in the archway. "Transfer the funds," my father barked, not even looking at me as he poured another drink. "Rhett has business opportunities pending. We need to allocate the capital properly. We'll set you up with a small allowance. Enough for rent." "Business opportunities." I laughed. It was a dry, sharp sound that made Maribel flinch. "Like the jet skis. Or the engagement party you haven't paid for." The room went silent. My father turned slowly, his face reddening. "How do you know about that?" "I know a lot of things," I said, stepping further into the room. I didn't sit. I tossed the heavy envelope containing the ledger onto the coffee table, right next to the scotch. "I know about the life insurance policy my biological mother left me. The one you liquidated in 2001. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her throat. That's a lie." "I have the bank transfers," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I have the dates. Have the amounts. You didn't buy this house with your investments, Dad. You bought it with my orphan money." "We raised you," my father shouted, standing up to tower over me, a tactic that used to make me cower. "We fed you. That money was reimbursement for the burden you were." "Reimbursement?" I challenged, not backing down an inch. "You spent $400,000 on a down payment and put me in the pantry." "It's in the past," Rhett yelled, slamming his glass down. "Who cares? Give us the check." "No," I said. "I'm not giving you a check. But I am giving you something." I pulled the foreclosure notice from behind my back. "This is a notice of default," I said. "You're 3 months behind on the mortgage." "So what?" my father sneered. "The bank will give us a grace period. I know the branch manager. We play golf." "You don't know the manager," I said softly. "Because the bank doesn't own the loan anymore." I stepped closer, looking him dead in the eye. "I do." My father's face went slack, the sneer sliding off like melting wax. What did you say?" "I own the note," I repeated, my voice calm, almost conversational. "Keegan Rowland bought your mortgage years ago through a holding company. When the trust disbursed this morning, the assets transferred to me. I am the bank. I am the lender. And you are in default." "That's impossible," my mother whispered, sinking onto the sofa next to Rhett. She looked smaller suddenly, the grande dame facade cracking. You're just a girl. You don't know anything about finance." "I know that foreclosure proceedings begin after 90 days of non-payment," I said. "Today is day 91. Rhett jumped up, his face twisted. "You can't do this. This is my house. I grew up here." "So did I said. "I grew up in the pantry. Remember? The one without a window." Maribel looked between us, her eyes wide. "Wait. If she forecloses, where do we live? That's a great question, Maribel, I said, turning to her. Maybe you can live in the house you picked out. Oh wait, you need a deposit for that. Which you don't have. You little witch. My father lunged, grabbing my arm. His grip was tight, painful. You think you can come in here and threaten us? I'll sue you for every penny. I'll claim elder abuse. I'll. Get your hands off her. The voice was cool and sharp. Alana Vance stood in the doorway, phone raised, camera recording. Assaulting the creditor is not a wise legal strategy, Mr. Calder. Neither is assaulting a woman in your own home while trespassing. My father released me as if I were burning hot. He stumbled back, looking at the phone, then at me. Trespassing. This is my house. Actually, Alana said, stepping into the room. Technically, since the acceleration clause in your mortgage was triggered this morning by the default, and since Ms. Calder has chosen to exercise her right to immediate possession, you are merely guests. And uninvited ones at that. Get out, I said. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Jory, please, my mother said, her voice trembling, tears finally spilling over. But they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of fear. We're family. You can't just kick us out on the street. Where will we go? We have appearances to maintain. Appearances, I said, shaking my head. That's all it ever was, wasn't it? Looking supportive. Looking successful. Well, here's your chance to look resilient. I walked to the front door and opened it wide. The heat of the afternoon poured in. You have 1 hour to pack your personal essentials, I said. Clothes, toiletries, medications, everything else. Furniture, electronics, art, the jet skis, stays. Those are assets that might need to be liquidated to cover the arrears. You can't be serious, Rhett spat. I'm deadly serious, I said. 1 hour. Or I call the sheriff to assist with the eviction. And I think we all know how much the neighbors would love to see that. My father looked at me with pure hatred. You'll regret this. You'll need us one day. I needed you for 22 years, I said, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. And you weren't there. I think I'll take my chances. I stood by the door, watching as the people who had made me feel small my entire life scrambled up the stairs in a panic. For the first time, the house didn't feel like a prison. Felt like a blank canvas. And I was holding the brush. But as I watched them go, Alana touched my arm. Jory, she said quietly. There's one more thing in the file. Something Roland found right before he died. It wasn't just money they hid. I looked at her, my stomach dropping. What else could there be? Your biological father, she said. He didn't die in a car crash like they told you. He's alive. The world tilted. And, she added, he's been writing you letters for 20 years. Your parents kept them all. Alive. The word felt heavy, like a stone dropped into a deep well. It didn't make a splash. It just sank, disappearing into the dark waters of my understanding. But the crash. They told me he was driving drunk. They told me he killed my mother and died on impact. A convenient narrative, Alana said, her voice soft but laced with steel. It painted you as the tragic orphan of a reckless man, making their sacrifice to adopt you seem even more saintly to the community. But the truth is, your father was injured, yes. He was in a coma for months. By the time he woke up, your mother was buried, and you had been processed into the system and fast-tracked to the Calders. Where are the letters? I demanded. The sadness was gone, incinerated by a white-hot fury that made the earlier confrontation about money feel like a playground squabble. If I know people like your parents, Alana said, glancing at the ceiling where heavy footsteps thudded back and forth, they keep their secrets where they can gloat over them. A trophy case. The study. I turned and ran down the hallway. My father's study had always been the forbidden zone. A dark, oak-paneled room that smelled of stale cigar smoke and self-importance. I threw the double doors open. It looked the same as it had when I was 10 and got grounded for a month just for stepping inside to retrieve a cat toy. The massive mahogany desk dominated the room. Behind it was a wall of bookshelves, mostly filled with books he hadn't read, but that looked impressive on Zoom calls. I started pulling books off the shelves. Nothing. I ripped open the desk drawers. Pens, staplers, checkbooks for accounts I was about to freeze. Nothing. Think, Jory, I whispered to myself. Where does he hide the things he's ashamed of? My eyes landed on the bottom cabinet of the built-in bookshelf. It was locked. Had always been locked. I looked around for a key. I saw a heavy brass letter opener on the desk, a gift from a senator my father liked to brag he knew. Grabbed it. I jammed the tip of the blade into the gap between the cabinet door and the frame. Jory, what the hell are you doing? I spun around. My father was standing in the doorway, a suitcase in his hand. His face flushed with exertion and panic. Open it, I commanded, pointing the letter opener at the cabinet. That's private property, he shouted. You said we could take our personal effects. I said essentials, I snapped. And I have a feeling what's in here belongs to me. He dropped the suitcase and lunged for me, but Alana stepped into the doorway behind him. Mr. Calder, she warned. Don't. He froze. I turned back to the cabinet. I wedged the opener in harder and kicked the wood near the lock. With a splintering crack, the latch gave way. The door swung open. There were no gold bars or stacks of cash inside. Just a cardboard box, dusty and unassuming. I pulled it out and ripped the lid off. Hundreds of envelopes spilled out. Some were yellowed with age, others bright white and crisp. All of them were unopened. All of them had the same handwriting, a jagged, forceful scrawl. Jory. To my daughter. To my little J. Picked one up. The postmark was from 3 weeks ago. He never stopped trying, I whispered. My hand shook so hard the paper rattled. You told me he was dead. You let me cry myself to sleep on Father's Day every single year. And he was writing to me. My father sneered, his mask finally slipping completely. He was a mechanic, Jory. Nobody. We gave you a name. We gave you status. We saved you from being him. You didn't save me, I said, clutching the bundle of letters to my chest. You stole me. I looked at Alana. Get them out. Now. You heard her, Alana said. My father looked at the letters in my hands, then at the foreclosure notice on the desk, and finally at me. He didn't look sorry. He looked defeated. He grabbed his suitcase and walked out, the sound of his expensive loafers retreating down the hall for the last time. I sank to the floor amidst the sea of envelopes. I wasn't just a rich orphan anymore. I was a daughter, and I had a lot of reading to do. The silence in the house was absolute. It wasn't peaceful. It was the hollow silence of a vacuum where all the oxygen had been sucked out. The front door had clicked shut minutes ago, sealing my adoptive family outside, but I was still on the floor of the study, surrounded by 20 years of stolen words. I picked up an envelope with a stamp from 2005. The paper was brittle, yellowed by time and the darkness of the cabinet. I slid the letter out, my fingers trembling so hard I almost tore the fold. Dear Jory, happy 4th birthday, little bird. I remember you used to try to whistle before you could talk. I hope they bought you that red tricycle you pointed at in the catalog before the accident. I have a picture of you taped to my toolbox. It's the one where you have spaghetti sauce all over your chin. I look at it every day. I'm working hard to get a lawyer who isn't afraid of the Calders. I haven't given up. I will never give up. Love, Dad. Tears dripped onto the paper, blurring the blue ink. My parents had told me I was difficult. They said I was a burden, a charity case they had generously taken in. But here, in this handwriting, I was a little bird. I was wanted. I was remembered. I opened another one, dated only 3 months ago. Jory, I heard you're graduating soon. I don't know if you'll ever see this, or if they've poisoned you against me, but I'm proud of you. I saw a picture of you online from the Dean's List announcement. You look just like your mother. You have her eyes, fierce and kind. I'm still at the shop in Salida. If you ever want to know the truth, the door is open. It's always been open. Silas. His name was Silas. Jory. Alana's voice was gentle. She had been standing guard by the door, giving me space, but now she stepped forward. We should go. The locksmith is on his way to secure the property, and I don't think you should be here when he arrives. It's been a long day. I wiped my face with the back of my hand and stood up. My legs felt shaky, but my heart was beating with a steady rhythmic thrum. It was the beat of a mission. I'm not staying here, I said, my voice raspy. I don't ever want to sleep in this house again. I'll book you a hotel suite, Alana offered, pulling out her phone. The Ritz in Denver isn't too far, or we could. No, I interrupted. I gathered the letters, shoving them into my tote bag until it bulged. I clutched the bag to my chest like a shield. I don't want a hotel. I want to go to Salida. Alana paused, her thumb hovering over her screen. She really looked at me, assessing my state. Salida is over 2 hours away. It's getting late. He's there, I said, pointing to the return address on the crumpled envelope in my hand. Silas Miller. Miller's Auto Body. He says the door is open. He might not be there at night, Alana reasoned, though she was already putting her phone away. Then I'll wait in the parking lot, I said. I've waited 22 years. I'm not waiting another night. I looked around the study one last time. The mahogany desk, the fake books, the smell of my father's expensive cologne. It all felt like a stage set for a play that had finally been cancelled. I didn't care about the pool or the square footage. I didn't care about the foreclosure or the revenge. Not anymore. I just wanted the truth. You drive, I told Alana. She nodded, a small, genuine smile touching her lips. I'll drive. We walked out of the house, leaving the front door wide open. Let the air out. Let the rot clear. I didn't look back at the mansion as we climbed into the sedan. I kept my eyes on the horizon, where the sun was beginning to dip low behind the Rockies, painting the sky in colors of bruising purple and hopeful gold. I was going to find the mechanic. I was going to find my father. The drive through Bighorn Sheep Canyon was a blur of jagged shadows and sweeping headlights. I clutched the tote bag of letters so tight my fingers ached, the paper crinkling softly with every turn Alana took. She drove with focused precision, the luxury sedan cutting through the darkness like a knife, but the silence inside the car was thick with unspoken questions. Why didn't he just come for me? I asked, breaking the quiet. My voice sounded small, younger than my 22 years. If he knew where I was. If he loved me. He tried, Alana said, her eyes fixed on the winding road. The Calders had the best lawyers in the state, Jory. They painted him as unstable, unfit, a drunk driver who killed his wife. Every time he filed for visitation, they buried him in legal motions he couldn't afford to fight. Then they got the restraining order. If he came within 500 feet of you, he went to jail. I looked down at the bundle in my lap. He had fought a war I didn't even know was happening. While I was crying in my room because my mother criticized my hair, he was likely sitting in a courtroom, being told he wasn't good enough to see his own child. We hit the city limits of Salida just as the town clock struck 9. It was a stark contrast to the manicured, gated community I had left behind. Here, the streets were lined with historic brick buildings and mud-splattered pickup trucks. Felt grounded. Felt real. GPS says it's on the edge of town, Alana said, turning the wheel. The tires crunched as we transitioned from pavement to a gravel road. And there it was. Miller's Auto Body. It wasn't a palace. It was a corrugated metal building with a fenced yard full of car parts. But a single bay door was rolled up, spilling warm, yellow light onto the gravel lot. The sound of a wrench clanking against metal drifted out, rhythmic and steady. Alana put the car in park and killed the engine. Do you want me to come with you? I shook my head, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. No. I need to do this alone. I stepped out into the cool mountain air. It smelled of pine needles, river water and motor oil, a scent that somehow felt like a memory I couldn't quite place. My graduation heels were impractical for the gravel, but I didn't care. I walked toward the light. I stopped at the edge of the open bay door. A man was working under the hood of an old Ford truck. He wore navy blue coveralls stained with grease, and his hair was a mix of dark brown and silver, tied back in a short, messy ponytail. He was humming something, a low, rumbling melody that made the hair on my arms stand up. It was the same tune from a music box I had hidden under my bed as a child, the one thing the Colders hadn't thrown away. He wiped his hands on a rag and turned around to grab a socket wrench from the bench. He froze when he saw me standing in the shadows. He looked tired. He looked worn down by years of hard labor. But his eyes, they were the same shape as mine. The same deep, fierce brown. He dropped the wrench. It clattered loudly on the concrete, the sound echoing in the silence. He didn't blink. He just stared, his chest heaving as if he had forgotten how to breathe. "Jory," he rasped, his voice rough with disbelief. I took a step forward, the bag of letters heavy on my shoulder. "You wrote me," I said, my voice trembling. "You wrote me for 20 years. He looked at the bag, then back at my face, tears instantly cutting tracks through the grime on his cheeks. He took a hesitant step toward me, holding his dirty hands out as if he wanted to touch me but was afraid he'd tarnish the image. "I never stopped," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I never stopped writing. I knew you'd find a way home. I didn't care about the grease. I didn't care about the dirt or the sweat or the fact that my white graduation dress was going to be ruined. I crossed the distance between us in 3 strides and collided with him." He hesitated for a fraction of a second, his hands hovering in the air, terrified to touch the daughter he'd been told was too good for him. But when I buried my face in his shoulder, wrapping my arms around his ribcage, he broke. He let out a sob that sounded like something tearing deep inside his chest, and his arms clamped around me, lifting me off the ground. He smelled of engine oil and peppermint soap, a scent that unlocked a memory so vivid it made my knees weak. I remembered being 3 years old. I remembered strong hands lifting me up to touch the sky. "I got you," he choked out, rocking me back and forth. "I got you, Jay." We stood there for a long time, the only sound the humming of the shop lights and our ragged breathing. When he finally set me down, he kept his hands on my shoulders, looking at me with a desperate, hungry intensity. He wiped a smudge of oil from my cheek with his thumb, his hand trembling. "They told me you hated me," I whispered. "They said you were a drunk, that you killed Mom." Silas's face hardened, the sorrow replaced by a cold, old anger. He walked over to a tool bench and pulled a rag from his pocket, wiping his hands aggressively. "I wasn't drunk," he said, his voice low. "The brakes failed on the truck. I told the police. I told the insurance investigators. But the Colders, they had friends in the precinct. They had money. I had a busted leg and a coma." He leaned against the workbench, looking at the floor. By the time I woke up, the narrative was set. Silas Miller, the reckless mechanic, killed the golden daughter of the Calder dynasty. Froze. The Calder dynasty. I was adopted. I was a charity case. Silas looked up, confusion knitting his brows. "Charity case. Jory, is that what they told you?" He laughed, a bitter, sharp sound. "They didn't adopt a stranger, Jory. They took in their niece." My mouth fell open. "Niece? Your mother, Maya, was your adoptive father's sister," Silas revealed. "She was Eleanor Calder's favorite. She was the brilliant one, the kind one. She was the one Eleanor left the estate to." The room seemed to tilt. "The estate? You mean the house?" "Everything," Silas said. "The house, the land, the investments. When Eleanor died, your father, my brother-in-law, was furious. He got nothing but a small stipend. Maya got the fortune. But when Maya died in the crash," he gestured around the humble shop. I was the husband. Legally, it should have come to me in trust for you. But they challenged the marriage license. They challenged the will. They declared me unfit and took custody of you. He stepped closer, his eyes burning. They didn't adopt you out of the goodness of their hearts, Jory. They adopted you because you were the key to the vault. As long as they were your guardians, they controlled Maya's inheritance. They've been living in your house, spending your money, and treating you like a servant in your own kingdom. I felt the blood drain from my face. The Jory Trust wasn't just life insurance. It was everything. The jet skis, the country club memberships, the renovations. It was all mine. Keegan Rowland knew, Silas said softly. He was the executor of Eleanor's will. He tried to stop them, but the court sided with the stable family over the mechanic. So Keegan did the only thing he could. He bought the debt. He watched them spend. And he set up that final trust to give you the one thing they couldn't steal. The power to take it back, I whispered. Silas nodded. You have the leverage now, Jory. The question is, what are you going to do with it? I looked at the grease on my hands. My father's grease. I looked at the letters in the bag. Then I thought of my mother, the woman whose legacy had been stolen and twisted into a weapon against her own daughter. I'm going to finish it, I said. I'm going to take back what's mine. 3 months later, the sound of the auctioneer's gavel hitting the podium was the sweetest music I had ever heard. Sold. To the gentleman in the back. The Calder estate, the monument to my uncle's greed and my aunt's vanity, was gone. I didn't want to live in the museum of my trauma. I didn't want to sleep in a master bedroom that had been paid for with my mother's life insurance. I wanted it liquidated. I wanted the cash. I stood at the back of the crowd, wearing jeans and a leather jacket, watching the new owners shake hands. They looked happy. Good for them. They didn't know the ghosts that lived in the drywall. As for the Calders, they learned the hard way that appearances don't pay rent. Alana had been ruthless. Once the evidence of the embezzlement came out, their lawyer dropped them faster than a hot coal. My father was currently facing a forensic audit by the IRS. My mother was living in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the south side of Pueblo, ironically, in a neighborhood she used to make fun of. And Rhett, the last I heard, he had finally found steady employment. He was washing dishes at a diner near the highway. I hoped he didn't break any plates. I didn't visit them. I didn't write them a letter explaining why I won. I simply erased them from my narrative. Their irrelevance was a far greater punishment than any scream could be. I walked out to the parking lot where Silas was waiting. He was leaning against a brand new truck, the first new vehicle he'd owned in 30 years. I had bought it for him with the first disbursement of the trust. He had cried for 20 minutes when I handed him the keys. Ready to go home? He asked, opening the door for me. Yeah, I said, climbing in. Let's go. We weren't going back to the auto shop to sleep on a cot. We were heading to a plot of land we'd bought just outside Salida, right by the river. It was 10 acres of pine trees and open sky. We were building a house there, together. I was handling the architecture and the finances. He was handling the foundation and the framing. It wasn't going to be a mansion. It was going to be a home. As we drove through the canyon, the sun setting in a blaze of orange and violet, I pulled the sun visor down. Tucked into the strap was the photo Silas had kept in his toolbox for 2 decades, the one of me with spaghetti sauce on my chin. I looked at that little girl. She looked happy. She looked loved. For 22 years I thought I was a joke. I thought I was the punchline to a story about a difficult, unwanted child. But as the wind whipped through the open windows, carrying the scent of pine and freedom, I realized the truth. I wasn't the punchline. I was the writer. And the story was finally mine. This story is proof that no matter how hard people try to bury you, the truth always finds a way to the surface. Jory didn't just get the money, she got her dad back. She got her history back. If you made it to the end of this journey, I need you to do one thing for me. If you believe that karma is real and that people like Jory and Silas deserve their happy ending, Smash that subscribe button right now. Don't just like the video, subscribe. Join our family because here we fight for the underdog. And tell me in the comments, if you received $5 million today, who is the first person you would call? Let me know below.